We'll get going here. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. My name is Laura O'Callaghan, and I'm the President and CEO of the Tri-County Regional Chamber. We're located in Milford. We've all received this little red book in the mail, I'm sure, but sometimes it can be confusing and try and understand how the questions are written, and often a yes vote means no and vice versa. So State Representative Shawn Dooley and I had a conversation last week in regards to the ballot questions. And we decided, let's put an information session together and learn more about the 4 questions, get more in depth about that. Now, this is not a debate, simply an information session. We'll spend approximately 15 minutes on each ballot question. After we hear the pros and cons, we can ask a question in the chat box. Alan will try and get to as many as possible in the allotted time. So I'm going to send it on over to you now. Shawn, how are you?
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's I agree. We were talking last week. We had a business forum down in Franklin, and we were, there was so many questions about the ballot questions because they are confusing. They're not well written, I think intentionally so. And then the television commercials just make it 10 times worse because there's so much spin. So I appreciate you putting this on. If there's anyone has any questions for me from a legislative point of view, or if I hear anything that's being said that I have questions on or I have comments on, and would like to chime in, I'm happy to do that as well. But we're very blessed and fortunate to have Alan Earls, who's the editor-in-chief of the Franklin Observer and a former reporter with the Milford Daily News, being our moderator today, and he's going to kind of go over and give a summary. I've watched several things that Alan has done, and he's been phenomenal. It's clear spoken, concise, to the point, and as unbiased as I think you're going to get on any of these subjects. They're very diverse, especially questions 2 and 3, which I'm looking forward to learning from Alan, because I do this for a living, and they confuse me. So without further ado, Alan Earls.
Hey, thanks, Shawn, and thank you for everyone who's participating today. As Shawn said, it is a really confusing bunch of questions. It's a combination of legalese and marketing spin, and it's even worse on TV. I'm going to do my best to present a good background. We had somebody work over some of the material, and I helped. That came from the ballot question book and other sources. So we have information on both sides of the question. I will inevitably, though, take kind of a business perspective too, because we are representing business people through the chamber, and I want to make sure that where there's a difference between outer neutrality and a business perspective, I not give a nod to that. Okay, question 1, and actually question 1 and 4 are very similar. They ultimately boil down sort of to ideology, but here goes. Question 1 creates a 4% tax on incomes that exceed $1 million, and it's supposed to be for education and transportation purposes. That means that anyone who earns or takes in $1 million or more a year, not necessarily earned in the sense of having a job, will be paying 9% on taxes instead of the typical 5%. This so-called millionaire's tax would raise about $1.3 billion in the coming year. And of course, this will not affect people making less than that amount of money. The tax rate stays the same. And again, it's supposed to go toward transportation and education. The yes vote people say that's the main thing. It's going to help these 2 things we need money on: education, where there isn't enough money to pay all the teachers we need, and roads, which have been going to heck for forever. The people who support that are Fair Share Massachusetts. I think that's a group almost exclusively focused on this. Coalition for Social Justice, Raise Up Massachusetts, Senators Markey and Warren, Karen Spilker from the Senate, our state Senate, a few state representatives, and so on. Springfield City Council, unions, American Federation of Teachers and Massachusetts Teachers Union. They put millions of dollars into this, and the Service Employee International Union Council has also put money in. I think the total money they're spending is about $18 million to push this through. Let's talk about who opposes it. There's a coalition to stop the tax hike amendment, 1 Republican state rep, the current Republican gubernatorial candidate, and lots of organizations. Associated Industries of Massachusetts, which represents many, if not most, of the biggest companies in the state, Boston Chamber of Commerce, Citizens for Limited Taxation, bless them, Massachusetts Seafood Collaborative, Pioneer Institute, and the Retailers Association of Massachusetts. So how do we get past the slogans and just talk a little bit more about what this actually means? The state constitution as currently written, as I understand it from reading it, insists that each class of income must be taxed, and taxation under each class of income, like a job, like income from a bank interest, has to be the same no matter whether you make $1 or $1 million. So this would do two things, as I understand it. It would change that to allow a higher taxation rate, and it would allow the lumping together of all of those things that heretofore have been separate tax rates in most cases, and allow you to tax that number, no matter what it is, over $1 million at this higher rate. If you weren't going to call it the millionaire's tax, my personal feeling is, again, wearing a business hat, is you could also call it the greed tax, because it's always easier to put a tax on somebody else that has more money than you. But then there's a fairness question. An awful lot of the people that would fall into this category are family farms, where you might have 100 acres of land, you worked and worked to preserve it all your life, and you want to sell it so you can, leave money for your grandchildren or something. Wham, you get this essentially double taxation over what you would have gotten before. Many small businesses that are closely held also would really get hit badly. And on that question, the supporters say, well, they can get help from an accountant and work around some of that. I think that's true, but it's certainly it's a big philosophical change. There have been other attempts to change this before by ballot initiatives and legislation, again, as I understand it, and they've fallen short because it's a big change from one size fits all regular rate for the same category of income to this. So the other question, which I can't answer, maybe Shawn can, the previous efforts to change the Constitution so that it would allow different tax rates and you could tax higher income people more. It doesn't specifically allow that, but my sense is that this sort of opens the door that legislators could work once the Constitution has been changed in this way to do other things with the tax code. And I'm going to ask Shawn if he has an opinion on that. Am I just being paranoid, or does this really kind of open the door, that little crack where much more taxation could come through this in the future?
No, it's obvious. It's a slippery slope. It's they've tried 7 times and failed to have a graduated income tax. If you think they're going to stop at $1 million, you're crazy, because we're going to have 4% in $1 million, and in a couple of years we're going to we need some more money for something else. All right, we're going to tax everyone over 500,000, and they're just going to continue to divide us. And from a business community standpoint, it's really hard from the standpoint of, if you're a S corporation or an LLC, if you're a flow through entity, all of that income counts. So it's not, as opposed to a C corp where you're able to shelter that. That's a big aspect. And the one other thing is that no one's really talking about short-term capital gains, especially in a state that like Massachusetts, where we have a lot of investments. Short-term capital gain rates over $1 million now going up to 16.5%, which will make us the highest in the country. Will be even higher than California. And I think this is just foolhardy, given the economy. It's really tight, and it's so easy for a business to relocate to New Hampshire now that people are working remotely. Most people that have this kind of money already have a house at Lake Winnipesaukee, so for them just to change things around a little bit. I had lunch with Governor Sununu. He said they have a whole marketing plan set up. So if this passes, they're going to go after and try to recruit all of our businesses.
Right. Yeah, it really does dampen the entrepreneurial spirit that is what has made this state great over the years, if you know you're going to get whacked that way. I was just going to say, I'm old enough to remember when the alternative minimum tax came in the early 70s. And I think that was aimed at people with a few $100,000 in income. Now, admittedly, it's been a long time, but that's never been revised. So people with very modest incomes, count me in, have to fill out all the forms for the alternative minimum tax, which was the same kind of thing. It was supposed to go after the rich, so-called, but it ends up over time affecting practically everybody, or certainly a much bigger swath of humanity. And what about, is it really needed? I know that's one of the questions we've had, because we've had these surpluses the last few years. They may not persist, obviously, if the economy dips, but given that there's been a steady surplus and actually money coming back to taxpayers now, we've had that question that came in earlier of, do we need that additional tax at all, or is this just a, you know, a throw out to people that want to punish people who are better than them, better off than them, not better than them, but better, making money more than them. And of course, the ads go back and forth on whether the money is really earmarked. The supporters say yes, but those in opposition point out that, in fact, and I believe this is true, the legislature can in fact appropriate that money as requested under the constitutional amendment, but then take it away somewhere else where it might have been budgeted for those purposes in the first place. Yeah, so that's the overall presentation. We have a bunch of questions we received earlier. I don't think I see any more coming into the chat box, but feel free to throw some in. Questions we have here from that came in earlier are, how is the 1 million income calculated? I think we touched on that. Capital gains are included. Sales of a home are included. And as Representative Dooley just mentioned, there potentially the threshold could be lowered at some other point, which would affect far more people. So the concern is that this is just opening the door and more troubles are going to come through. Absolutely, this will affect small business owners. That was another question, as we just mentioned. And you know, I guess the $64,000 question, so to speak, someone asks is, if there's a big budget every year, why can't these things just be budgeted in advance, like taking care of education and roads and bridges? And again, I will resist the temptation to, you know, say anything snide. I think some people believe that all these things are deficient and will just need more money, blank check. When the state was on the ropes in the early 90s, I got to speak with Governor Dukakis's fix-it guy, a highly ranked accounting professional. And he said to me, he was a Democrat, he said to me, the problem with government is they tend to look at things in terms of how much you're spending, not how much you're getting. So I think that's the kind of analysis we need to make sure we include in these kinds of topics. Is the spending effectively spent? Is it accomplishing what we want? Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we can move on to question 2, if everyone's okay with that. Question 2 is oh my gosh, can of worms. How many people like to go to the dentist? Question 2 enacts a medical loss ratio of 83% for dental insurance plans beginning on January 1, 2024, about a year out. This means that every 83 cents of the dollar would have to be spent on patient care, with only the other 17 cents going toward administrative costs. Any additional money would have to go back as rebates to the patients if the 83% mark is not met. The state's Division of Insurance would supervise the premium changes to obstruct price changes that are unreasonable. And the second part of the question would compel dental insurance companies to provide current and expected medical loss percentages for plans and other financial information, so everyone knows how the money is being spent. The vote yes people are essentially say, we all deserve better dental care. Insurance companies make tons of money, and some of them have a much different loss spending ratio than what they're proposing here. You know, maybe 25% for administration. The people supporting this are the Committee on Dental Insurance Quality, Fair Share for Dental Care, and Massachusetts Dental Care Providers for Better Dental Benefits. In addition, Alliance of Independent Dentists in Massachusetts, the Association of Independent Dentists, the Mass Association of Orthodontists, Massachusetts Society of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons, and the Medical Orthodontists of Massachusetts Association, and the Mass and American Dental Association. They've raised and not yet spent a total of about $5 million on this. Why vote no? And that's, I guess, another of these $64,000 questions. The vote yes people are proposing for the first time for a state, any state, to regulate dental insurance at this level of detail, perhaps at all. So that's entirely new. We're walking out on a limb here as a state. And also, they don't appear to have done any analysis of how this will work in practice. The number is 83%. I'm not sure where that was derived, but it seems a bit arbitrary. So not unexpectedly, the dental insurance people who want to keep things the way they are, status quo, are sort of going after that. And they've pointed out that if you mandate this breakdown, this distribution, inevitably, they say, rates will go up and some people will find dental insurance and possibly even dental care itself more expensive. I think it's interesting to consider how the dental folks, insurers and dentistry providers have fared during COVID. Is that for a long period of time, people mostly weren't going to the dentist because of COVID fears. So some of these dental insurance companies may have ended up with extra money because they were still collecting premiums. But conversely, 2 or 3 years down the road, if dental science is any indicator, we may have all kinds of people coming in with serious dental problems that festered literally over a period of years. So insurers may be paying a lot of money. Also, I don't think it distinguishes between large and small carriers. They probably have very different cost structures. But the dental insurance carriers, for the most part, are not on board with this. People fighting it include the Committee to Protect Quality Dental Care Access. Individual donors include Dental Services of Massachusetts, Metropolitan Life. I think I saw Delta Dental, but it's not on this list, as also being trying to oppose this. So, it's one of those things. I think almost anybody likes the idea of getting more dental care for a given dollar. To me, the question is whether that will really occur. That's, again, my personal view, but it's certainly tempting to vote in favor of this because it sounds like a great deal for the average person. But I really wonder if the information is there to back that up. So that would be the question I would leave out there for people to consider as they go into the voting booth or fill out their ballots. Now, we did get a couple of questions in advance on this. One, do we know the impact of this change? Will it raise rates or reduce benefits? And again, we don't really know. I think the measure attempts to guarantee certain benefits and puts the state in the business of overseeing the insurance industry to make sure it happens. But I think, again, I'm a non-specialist, but it seems like efforts to regulate insurance have not always gone as well as people would like. No other states that I know of have regulated dental insurance. That was a question. Is anybody else doing this? And the answer is a resounding no. We're the pioneers. Massachusetts is the pioneer in a lot of things, and sometimes that's a really good thing. All our smart citizens and active citizens come up with ideas that are pretty good, but maybe not always. I don't know. I have my questions on this one. And I don't think I see any more questions coming in on that. So let's dive into question 3, which has got to be the most confusing of the bunch. In Franklin, where I report on the news, we have a kind of miniature version of this. A Big Y location is looking for an all liquor license, and some of the smaller liquor stores are not happy with that. Here goes. Question 3 changes the number of licenses per establishment granted incrementally from no more than 12 in the coming year, 2023, to no more than 18 by 2031, and prohibits in-store automated self-checkout sales of alcohol. That's a pretty detailed regulation when you think about it. So you might just think back to how we got here. Massachusetts, way back when, was a hotbed of prohibition. We had a lot of dry towns where alcohol sales were prohibited. They're almost all gone now. I think there might be 1 or 2 left. But I think most of these regulations date back to the end of prohibition in the early 1930s, where sales of alcohol were going to be resumed. But most of the citizens, or many, at least the legislators, were not willing to make it an unregulated affair. So they introduced the package store, a euphemism that I love, because nobody wants to say liquor out loud if you're a good law-abiding citizen. So here in Massachusetts, we still go and buy liquor at our packies. Over the years, the very strict regulations of the 30s have gradually been released. So instead of just 1 or 2 licenses per owner or family, we're now up to, I think, 8 or 9. And it would go to 12 in 2023 and 18 by 2031. The proposed measure would raise the statewide limits on the number of licenses, but not as much as some would like. The largest players in the industry, especially outside of the state, would just as soon see no limits, so that one company could hold theoretically every liquor license in the state, I guess. That's not something being proposed right now, but they're trying to get past the modest changes proposed in this legislation or in this ballot question. The vote yes, people say, the vote yes will make an even playing field for smaller businesses, but still give opportunities to bigger companies to come in. Prohibiting self-checkout. Excuse me. I don't know if that's done currently in the state. It sounds like something that could be a risky field, but I'm betting it also is something that the smaller companies would probably not do anyway because they're small. They wouldn't need self-checkout, and they allege that it would improve public safety by reducing the likelihood of alcohol slipping through the self-checkout process, with perhaps IDs not being checked properly. The local smaller businesses like 21st Century Alcohol Retail Reform Commission and the Mass Package Store Association support this. And until about a month ago, it looked like it was going to sail through because no other opposition had surfaced. One of the questions we got is, which I'll get to later, asks whether, how this very complicated bill came to be. Was this a series of measures that were amalgamated? And the answer probably is yes. It sounds like one of those sausage making efforts behind the scenes between the different players to come up with something they could all live with. The bigger companies, the supermarket chains, would have preferred much less regulation, but by agreeing to this compromise, I guess everybody felt they could avoid a fight. But a very large company from out of state, from Maryland, in fact, decided to jump in because they would very much like to be part of this market. Total Wine is the company. They have almost 250 outlets across the country in 27 states. And they would like to say no to this measure because I believe they would like to come back with a different kind of measure in the future that's much more accommodating to bigger firms and greater growth. As a sort of sidebar, and Shawn, interrupt me if I'm off base on this, from what I've heard and talking to local people here in Franklin, the business is very different than it was some years ago. With the proliferation of pot shops, an awful lot of the money that used to go for 6-packs or a bottle of wine now go to the cannabis shops. So that's one form of competition they're facing. And in addition, the companies that thrived on selling beer and wine are now competing with canned hard liquor drinks that are very popular, especially with younger consumers. And my understanding is that those need to be sold through the all liquor license that that only some companies get to have. And I know in Franklin, the big Y is trying to get that all liquor instead of just the beer and wine. And the local package store folks that have the all liquor aren't thrilled about it. But it's a very complicated situation from a consumer standpoint. The less regulation, the better, usually, because prices tend to go down, but not always. And then there are these other, potential public safety and public morality and all that other stuff, questions that come into play. And last but not least, the fact that this has been a pretty regulated industry, and smaller businesses have gradually grown to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outlets. They would like to keep that and have it evolve to maybe more competition in the future, but they're concerned about just having the rug pulled out from under them entirely and bringing in the big national companies that would probably crush a lot of the locals. Shawn, you're around this stuff more than I have probably thought about more than anybody has, but is my summation a reasonable one?
No, I think it's a very reasonable, and and in addition to that, all the breweries popping up.
Yes.
That's
right.
Another thing that's been a huge impact on liquor stores, and so much that you can go to the farmers market in Franklin or in Norfolk and buy beer there, and from these
Right.
little microbrews and things along those lines. So it's becoming the proliferation of liquor, coupled that at the same time with marijuana. I think it's been a huge impact. What I don't understand, and I think this was one of these things, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was this compromise that ends up just an amalgamation that I don't think actually accomplishes anything. In the end, I still don't understand why a lot of the small liquor stores are supporting it, from the standpoint of it will allow for the grocery stores to compete at a higher level, which I think would be very dangerous. If I was a small package store, I wouldn't want necessarily Big Y where,
Right.
where you're already pushing the cart and you're already going to check out, and their buying power is a little better, and they can maybe get something a little bit cheaper. I wouldn't want to have buy there as opposed to going finish your grocery shopping and then going across the street to the liquor store. But for whatever reason they are, it is a very confusing issue for me. I don't necessarily understand what it's trying to accomplish. I think it's been better off, in very few things I will say this about, but I think this was one that I think it would be better off going through the legislative process and getting worked out that way, and having different sides come to the table in committee and try to actually get to the end that they're trying to get to, and find a solution that way, because I don't understand. I think I'm a no on this one, just from the standpoint of, I guess if I don't understand it, I don't want to make a change.
Mm-hmm. Someone in the chat just added this probable correction on what I said. It writes, person writes, if you vote yes on 3, there's a gradual and limited increase of licenses for larger liquor stores, right? And if you vote no, they might come back and ask for unlimited number of licenses, which I think is what the big companies want. And in terms of the marketing, the no people, primarily this company from Maryland, have had these ads saying that they're benefiting, that they want to benefit the local family-owned businesses, and they show these images of small local family-owned businesses, which the yes people get upset by. But the fact of the matter is the gigantic firm from Maryland is family-owned. It's just gigantic. So there's a lot of hair splitting and marketing spin. It's a challenge to one's logic skills and listening skills to make the most of it. Yeah, and I'm probably a yes, just because I like to support the small businesses, but you may be right, Shawn. It's a little bit of a coin tosser at the end of the day. I don't see any questions in chat, so let's go on to question 4, because that may be a barn burner of a topic, and we can always come back and rehash a few of these things at the end informally. Question 4 gets a lot of attention, and it should. It changes who is authorized to receive a driver's license. The law would prohibit the registrar from asking an application about citizenship or immigration status when applying for a driver's license or motor vehicle registration. Would also authorize the registrar to accept certain documents to verify identity and date of birth of the applicant, no matter where they came from. Ideally, an unexpired foreign passport or consular identification documents, or documents from another state. The argument for voting yes, made by the yes people, is that having a driver's license is good because it lets people who are living here undocumented take their kids to school, go to the doctor, get to their job, and by allowing people to better access things like insurance and driver testing, arguably they suggest it could make the road safer. And there's probably some evidence to support that. I believe the chiefs of police and unions and the ACLU have supported this, along with Senate President Karen Spilker and Ron Mariano in the House. And it's gotten at least a few $100,000 in support, probably more than that.
And Alan, it's
yes.
the chiefs that are supporting are predominantly the major city chiefs.
Right.
So they're it's a little disingenuous from the standpoint of the Worcester, Boston, and Somerville chiefs are appointed by their mayors.
Yes.
So, they want to keep their jobs, whereas a majority of the small town, small community chiefs are opposed to it.
Thank you. I suspected that because I've talked to lots of individual law enforcement people who aren't as keen on it as you might be led to believe, and these things often tend to be driven by where the money comes from. Clearly, police chiefs in major cities are going to go with the leadership on something like this because that's where the money comes from for many of their programs. The history of this, of course, is that this got passed through the legislature quite easily early this year. Then, as now, the polls on what individual Massachusetts citizens think have not necessarily favored it. It's been at best about 50-50. And the people upset with it were able to quite readily gather almost double the number of signatures needed to get this measure on the ballot to repeal the measure. And they're the vote no people. They make the argument, a number of arguments. One is that it could threaten national security and safety, and this ties in with another point directly. The Registry of Motor Vehicles has never been exactly a shining example of a perfectly functioning government agency, to put it mildly. And I'm not condemning any of those people. They're probably not getting the funding they need or the leadership they need. But to the burdens that they are already all having trouble managing, with lines going out the door for the simplest of tasks, they're now going to be asked to become experts in understanding and vetting documents from what, about 200 countries around the world there are now, which is a pretty tall order. I actually asked the people at AAA, because they do some registry tasks, I asked them to comment for a story about whether they would be able to train their people, and they just refused to get back to me, because I'm pretty sure they don't know how they're going to do it. They're just going to kind of whistle Dixie if it continues this way. Yeah, and the no people point out that the 9/11 hijackers had 30 different driver's licenses that allowed them to function fully in the United States for all practical purposes while they planned what they were planning. I don't think we need to depend on anything as that dramatic as a concern, but it certainly makes you wonder. And then additionally, the argument I get from many people who have immigrated to the United States illegally is, what about standing in line and following the rules that are set up to protect all Americans and to benefit all Americans by ensuring that people that are in the United States belong here and have a right to be here. It's never an anti-immigrant thing. America obviously has been built on immigrants, but there is, I hear this especially from people who are immigrants and who have come here legally and obtained the citizenship. It's a fairness issue, aside from anything else. So that probably counts as editorializing, but it's a key part that the no people focus on in this, and in fact how it further incentivizes illegal immigration. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is a number that shocked me, but so I went back and looked it up and found some sourcing. Currently, the state spends something like $2 billion a year on benefits for people who are here illegally, which is a pretty astounding number. It's comparable to the rebate we're getting this year, thanks to the Chapter 62F from the 1980s that's mandating this return of funds. If that money weren't being spent there, we could get that kind of rebate every year, perhaps. And last but not least, I should point out that Governor Charlie Baker, who is by no means a right winger, he's a very middle of the road, sensible kind of guy. He vetoed this legislation, and the legislature overrode it. So I really do think there's a lot of opportunities to claim common sense on the part of the no folks. But again, the yes people feel it comes down to primarily a humanitarian issue. People are here, they need to be taken care of, they need to function, and this bill will help them. So that's why they say a vote yes is a good idea. Lots of questions on this, but I've got to find my cheat sheet of questions. Yeah, what is the logic of giving illegal residents a license? I think we touched on that. The ads we see on television claim it will make the roads safer. I don't think there are validated studies proving this that I'm aware of. 18 states have implemented this, but I don't know if there's unambiguous data that it has improved safety. But it's possible. It's certainly possible. And there have also been hints that this will lead to election influence. That's a really key question. The as I understand it, and Shawn, correct me if I'm wrong, the current system, which was designed to encourage voting, is that if you get a Massachusetts license, you're automatically, your name is sent to the town clerk and you're automatically considered eligible to vote. But if you're not a citizen, you're supposed to check a box saying I'm not eligible to vote. If people neglect to do that, it's entirely possible that a significant number of people who are not here legally could be given, in effect, the right to vote. It actually wouldn't be a right, it would just be that they could vote because the system wouldn't be able to
Right.
catch them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's supposedly being caught by the Secretary of State's office. So when it goes through it as it goes out of the RMV into the VRIS system, the vital records system, the up in Boston, they're supposed to be having some way to catch it. We don't know what that is yet. What we did was we put in an amendment that allowed town clerks to validate it as well. They specifically took that out, so town clerks cannot validate whether someone is a citizen or not. They are not allowed to know. Same with police. They exempted police from understanding if they pull someone over, they cannot tell even in their computer system. So what worries me, even if the state system worked perfectly, which I always have my doubts, is one of the far left's big push right now is same day voter registration. It's ongoing, and the Senate passed it with a substantial majority this year. We were able to block it in the House, but if you give someone a license and you have same day voter registration and you do not allow the town clerk to check, then these people will be going to the polls and will automatically be able to be registered that day. There is no computer system at most of our polls. The VRAS system is a hardwired system, so it's not like something we can do wirelessly to check someone out during the day and send it up to Boston. Not that they could handle it anyways, but in that particular instance, there is no way to protect a non-citizen from voting if they provide their driver's license. So that's there's just so many things. If they really truly cared about safety, there was a lot of other things that we could have done. We could have made a driver privilege card like they did in Utah and in California that looks different. It has different benefits. It has, requires driver's training. And also further to your point, the RMV being the gatekeeper for these records and determining whether someone's here legitimately, if you have and I don't think it's outrageous to think it's a public safety issue from a national security standpoint. If you have someone that has documentation from Syria or Afghanistan, a country that, like Syria, is not really actually in existence right now, and there's no way to confirm those documents anyways, let alone a clerk at the RMV trying to read, Arabic or Syrian or whatever their documents are written in. I think it would be very easy for someone to say, here's my documents that says I'm Bob Smith. Here's my date of birth, and all right, here you go. Here's your driver's license. And that scares me. I just think it's a huge mistake to have the RMV being the ones in charge of vetting all of this.
Yeah, and there's certainly been many issues at the RMV in recent years. You issuing the same license numbers, but plate numbers, but just with different designs, and people getting tickets for the wrong, like a veteran's plate versus a regular plate, and people getting tickets to the wrong person, and of course the neglect of the problems with that driver in New Hampshire that was in the accident that killed 7 people. I guess they've decided it wasn't his fault directly, but he shouldn't have been on the road. But the registry never caught that for months and months and months. Right. With terrible consequences.
Yeah, no, I have a firefighter plate, and I've received numerous tickets for some 18-wheeler that has a very similar, has the same
right,
quote unquote plate.
Right. The bigger philosophical question, this speaks to our, the divisions and complexities of national politics, is so many states are just making up rules that are not in conformance with federal rules, like essentially letting people who are here illegally be essentially legal, or rules regarding marijuana, or there are others on the other side of the issues where states are just going their own way. And I don't know if we'll ever get to a place philosophically where we can resolve all those underlying issues and develop a healthier national consensus. But at the moment, we're on our own, each state figuring out these things. Actually, I should just note that one more of the no vote people is State Senator Dean Tran, who's currently running for Congress, who's actually, a Vietnamese vote person, I believe, or at least he's a refugee from Vietnam. So he's a perfect case in point of someone who arrived, went through the processes legally, appreciates it, and wants to defend that, rather than just saying whatever, which is kind of the proposal here, in my view. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I think we've actually touched on most of the questions, either directly or indirectly. Let me see what's in chat. Someone asked how much money was provided for and against the ballot measures. Let me see if I have that here. I probably do. The 4 people look like they spent about $338,000, and then no people about 61,000 so far, but they've got another 60,000 to go if this numbers are correct. So they've been, the yes people have been outspending by about 2 to 1.
Yeah, and Alan, I know you mentioned the teachers have put in like 16 million. As of yesterday, they were over 23 million that they've invested into question 1. So,
yeah,
Massachusetts Teachers Association.
Right, and there's I guess there's no law against supporting measures that you think will benefit you, but the everyday voter should consider that. Who will benefit from this really, and is it the most prudent thing for the whole state to take this measure? So many of these things could be legislated, and that's certainly one of them. Yeah, what else have we not touched on? Question 3. Yeah, okay. So how are we going to vote here? I'm a no. Let's see, no on 1, right? And probably no on 2. I think I might be a yes on 3, and I'm no on 4. But we shall see what happens on November 8th and beyond.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. That was very informative. I appreciate it. Thank you, Shawn. We appreciate you coming on.
No, happy to be here.
That's awesome. We did record this session, so Sherry will send the link over to everybody that signed up, and a lot of people could not show up today, but they wanted the link to listen later on. So we will do that. And if anybody has any questions, Alan, if they want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Sure. Email Alan, ALAN.R.Earls, EARLS @gmail.com. Right. Anything from the good old days of the Milford Daily News to current events. I'm happy to change.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Sherry.